Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy, The Secret of the Golden Flower, part 23, in which I will continue reading Carl Jung's introduction to The Secret of the Golden Flower. What is it? Oh, hey, Gwydion. What's what? I don't know, you just seem a little bit low energy today. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading Secret of the Golden Flower, but now it's just Carl Jung going on and on with this whole white people shouldn't follow Eastern paths thing. Right. You disagree. Yeah, obviously. Can't you just disagree with him? What do you mean? Rather than getting upset about it, I see what you mean. I can try. It's just that my whole life I've had to contend with these people who hold as some kind of truth pillar that if Westerners aren't going to be Christian or atheist, that they should be some kind of European neo-pagan. Hello, Gwydion? I know, and we did that for years, decades even. But there was always just as much affinity for Eastern things, and Buddhism in particular has been the core philosophy underlying all of it. Right. Even during our catechism, Father Alexei had to convince us that it was okay to be Buddhist and Christian at the same time, and that these two things didn't contradict each other. Right, until after the confirmation, then he kind of changed his tune on that one. After chrismation, right. Though I think it was the goddess invocation that he objected to more than the Buddhism. Maybe he wasn't all that specific when he was shouting harlot at us during the homily the last time we ever set foot in that church. So is it possible for you to set aside all of that emotional weight and charge and simply disagree with Jung about Westerners sticking to Western ways? He even comes out and says he had no knowledge whatsoever of Chinese philosophy when he started writing the introduction, and somehow he became an expert during the, year that it took him to write the introduction? He couldn't even imagine that same year my grandfather was shaving his head in a monastery in Western China, and that he'd raise his son that way, and that his son would teach me to chant Om in the morning, and that would become my spiritual foundation. You're right. Carl Jung probably didn't have the ability to imagine that one day that would happen when he was writing this introduction. Yeah, so hey, cheer up. You know something Jung doesn't. Doesn't that make your ego feel good? Ego, my me, my I, is it a possession? Who's the one possessing it if it's a possession? You know what I mean. Do I? So are you going to read today or what?
Is there anything else Jung says that you disagree with philosophically?
Well, last time, I guess that was when we were reading the Black Books, he was going on about how people have a responsibility toward culture building, and that was more important than your own individual peace and tranquility.
And you disagree?
Obviously, I'm over here on the other side of the planet selfishly defending my peace and tranquility against all who would seek to pull me back into some groupthink trauma drama.
So you disagree?
Yeah, I disagree. Or at least I don't think it should be a rule for everyone all the time. What do you mean? Just that I agreed with him as far as what I do with my own time and energy for years, putting the needs of my students before my own, passionately arguing against what I saw to be the errors and the groupthink of my culture. Things like Westerners sticking to Western things and the relative importance of culture building versus one's own peace and tranquility. For example, sure. So nothing has changed, and you agree with Carl Jung about that. What? You place so much importance on culture building that you come out and publicly declare that Westerners specifically should embrace Eastern ways and should place their own peace and tranquility before culture building. And you're so passionate about it that you lose your own peace and tranquility. Okay, I see where you're coming from, but it's not about culture building. It's much more about the individuals within that culture. Okay, all right. So now what? I guess I'll read. You still seem upset. Maybe this'll help? Maybe. Thanks, everybody, for helping me sort all that out. So you're good? You're going to read this without yelling at Carl Jung and calling him names? No guarantees, but I'll try. We'll see how it goes. All right, Edward, you take care, all right? You too.
Don't forget to meditate.
Thank you, Pymander. You too.
I never do.
All right. The I Ching. I don't have a coin. Don't worry about that. I almost forgot. I've taken the liberty of removing the cards for the I Ching hexagrams that you've already used in these episodes. Thank you. That's really cool. We were also thinking this might help cheer you up. You guys, you're so sweet. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Editor Edward, can you tell us about the cat?
Because of its popularity in Chinese communities, including Chinatowns in the United States, the maneki neko is frequently mistaken for being Chinese in origin rather than Japanese. The maneki neko is a common Japanese figurine which is often believed to bring good luck to the owner. In modern times, they are usually made of ceramic or plastic. The figurine depicts a cat, traditionally a calico Japanese bobtail, with a paw raised in a beckoning gesture. The figurines are often displayed in shops, restaurants, pachinko parlors, dry cleaners, laundromats, bars, casinos, hotels, nightclubs, and other businesses, generally near the entrance as well as households. Some maneki neko are equipped with a mechanical paw that slowly moves back and forth.
Thank you, Editor Edward. Okay, we'll just do this kind of quickly. Sorry about the couple of day break. We were up in Anjuna. Here's some footage of that. So I'm just gonna cut it. You can see, and this top one, I'm gonna cut that, right? And I'm gonna take the top card. And it seems to be unbroken, or rather solid. I'm trying to avoid using the double negative like that. Solid, broken, solid, broken. And we'll put that, we're doing a mixed thing. Usually if it's the card, we put the card on the screen, but I'm going to do the thing over my head, but use the card. Alright, that does make it a lot easier. God, you guys, that's kind of a brilliant idea. Maybe we should just stick to that moving forward. I remembered the magnifying glass today. Oh, I'm on top of my shit. Alright, so Tui is lake, and what's the other one? Chen. Tui on the bottom, Chen on the top. Thunder Lake. So that's figure 54. This is normally where we turn up the music, isn't it? But we're already here. I'm already almost there. Next page. It's called Kui Mei, the Marrying Maiden. Well, we haven't gotten that one before. And I did a thorough, Gwydion did a thorough inspection of these cards to make sure that these cards were cards we haven't gotten before. But I think it's upside down.
A few minutes later.
No, it was right side up. It's the Marrying Maiden. I don't know what happens there. I blame the oregano, if there's anybody watching who would be concerned about me doing things. It's a theatrical act. It's an act. I'm an actor portraying a character who's smoking something that's not what you saw. And in order to dramatize that, I smoked oregano. Officer. Anyway, I'm going to keep reading. So up here it says, in relationships, desires lead to misfortune. Behave with discipline and balance. Well, this is interesting. We'll just say it's an I Ching, and it's some advice in relationships. Desires lead to misfortune. Behave with discipline and balance. Okay. I think it seems to imply like desires that stray, like the kind Jesus says, don't think about, what you're not supposed to think about, that kind of thing. So it doesn't seem to be like very ominous. Like, hey man, things are, Anyway, so take it as an I Ching for the Secret of the Golden Flower Carl Jung introduction that we're about to read, or take it as something for you, or ponder in your mind, is this about Edward? I wonder. I don't know. No, I don't think so. All right. Well, let's get to the reading. Forgot the incense. I decided to go with the theme today. Did I ever tell you? No, maybe. I think it might have come up, but I don't remember the context. Did I ever tell you about yellow and blue? It's a new shirt. I bought it for this episode. Is that weird? I bought it because I had that old tie. I have one faded tie-dye shirt, the one Gwydion wore last time. Yeah, and I had this silly idea for how I could reframe things so that I could have a more pleasant experience reading Carl Jung's introduction. And me, BT, you saw it. You saw it. You were there, right? You remember? So, how annoying is the cat on a scale of 1 to 10? That sound, can you hear it? So that's going to be going in the background behind whatever music Editor Edward has decided to play. Hopefully it'll be subtle, hopefully not too obnoxious. Hopefully now that I've called attention to it, it isn't suddenly there where it wasn't there before. Actually, that's probably what happened, isn't it? Picking up right where Gwydion left off last time. Did he read last time? I think he did. Okay. Our text is concerned with this way, and this same problem comes up with my patients also. You remember this is where we left off, so we're just starting at that last couple of lines so we can get back into the groove. There could be no greater mistake than for a Westerner to take up the direct practice of Chinese yoga, for it would be a matter of his will and his consciousness, and would only strengthen the latter against the unconscious, bringing about the very effect to be avoided. I disagree, Mr. Jung. All right, let's do it. Let's move forward. Yes. The neurosis would then simply be intensified. It cannot be... Okay, I will say that this reminds me of people. So I'm not saying 100% he's wrong, but he's only right probably, I guess, maybe 70% of the time. But that's kind of like assuming that I'm one of 30. So is that elitism, or is that being snobby about, most people, don't get far enough to see it from a bird's eye view? Is that? What did Ibn Arabi say? But I'm not bragging. Yeah, that's what you say. As long as you say that, then you're covered. That is not a Sufi sin, at the very least. Never mind, I'll just keep reading. Okay. It cannot be sufficiently strongly emphasized that we are not Orientals. For those who just tuned in, I'm reading Carl Jung, and I have already stated I disagree with everything he's saying. If anybody jumped to the middle and they're going to take me out of context or whatever, just please don't take me out of context saying shit like that. Continuing. And therefore, we have an entirely different point of departure in these things. It's not as different as he's making it seem. Anyway, Continuing. Let's get through this, Edward. Hopefully he'll change the subject. What? It would be a great mistake to assume that this is the path every neurotic must travel. Well, I don't disagree with that statement. Okay. Or that it is the solution to be sought at every stage of the neurotic problem. I agree with what he just said. That sentence was perfect. No complaints about that sentence. As it was in a vacuum. It was fine. It is appropriate only in those cases where the conscious, is he saying it's appropriate sometimes? Or no, he's saying that he's about to describe a person who's Chinese or something. That's the only way. It is appropriate only in those cases where the conscious has reached an abnormal degree of development. Oh, like you, Mr. You. Aren't you fucking with this stuff? Sorry. And has therefore diverged too far from the unconscious. This high degree of consciousness is the conditio sine qua non. Wow, I've lost the ability to do Latin smoothly, haven't I? Nothing would be more wrong than to wish to open this way to neurotics who are ill on account of an undue predominance of the unconscious. Okay, if he's saying all this to try to limit the number of random people that try this. I mean, I can see, okay. I disagree with fundamentally what he's saying, and it's a good thing. I mean, he was publishing it while he was saying it. It seems kind of tongue-in-cheek that way. What are you actually saying? If you really meant this, you wouldn't have published it. You know what I mean? But he got locked into this thing with his translator friend, apparently. Anyway, for the same reason, this way of development has scarcely any meaning before the middle of life. That's a traditional way, but it's not wrong necessarily. Having started out on an intensive spiritual path that traditionally, going back 700, 800 years, people would say you have to be at least 40 and fully stable before you go on a path like this. And I did it at 16. And I, stayed focused on it until I was 30 something, and still kind of there in the background. But yeah, I don't disagree. It's good advice. That's the thing, is if he's talking to everyone, if he's talking to millions of people, he's thinking people are going to read what I write and they're going to make their decisions in life based on, maybe he's thinking this, maybe, and he's just trying to limit the number of, it's sort of like you don't recommend LSD to random people or just tell everyone to take it, because not every brain can handle it, and it's not to brag. You know what I mean? Anyway, what was I saying? In fact, if entered upon too soon, it can be decidedly injurious. I mean, I'm a biased example because, that kind of thing. As has been indicated, the reason for looking for a new way was the fact that the fundamental problem of the patient seemed insoluble unless violence was done to the one or the other side of his nature. Okay, what's the other side? I'm listening. Okay. So being in a cult is one side, what's the other side? I always worked with the temperamental conviction that fundamentally there was no insoluble problems, and experience justified me insofar as I have often seen individuals simply outgrow a problem which had destroyed others. This outgrowing, as I formerly called it, on further experience was seen to consist in a new level of consciousness. Some higher or wider interest arose on the person's horizon, and through this widening of his view, the insoluble problem lost its urgency. It was not solved logically in its own terms, but faded out when confronted with a new and stronger life tendency. It was not repressed and made unconscious, but merely appeared in a different light, and so did indeed become different. What on a lower level had led to the wildest conflicts and to panicky outbursts of emotion, viewed from the higher level of the personality, now seemed like a storm in the valley seen from a high mountain top. This does not mean that the thunderstorm is robbed of its reality, but instead of being in it, one is above it. One is now above it. I guess Carl and I don't disagree all that much. I just stopped at a bad part of his flow. Let's see. Where was I? However, since we are both valley and mountain with respect to the psyche, it might seem a vain illusion to feel oneself beyond what is human. one certainly does feel the effect and is shaken and tormented by it, yet at the same time one is aware of a higher consciousness, which prevents one from becoming identical with the effect, a consciousness which takes the effect objectively and can say, quote, I know that I suffer, end quote. What our text says of indolence, quote, indolence of which a man is conscious and indolence of which he is unconscious are 1,000 miles apart, end quote, holds true in the highest degree of effect also. Here and there, it happened in my practice that a patient grew beyond himself because of unknown potentialities, and this became an experience of prime importance to me. I had learned in the meanwhile that the greatest and most important problems of life are all, in a certain sense, insoluble. They must be so because they express the necessary polarity inherent in every self-regulating system. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. I therefore asked myself whether this possibility of outgrowing, that is, further psychic development, was not the normal thing, and therefore remaining stuck in a conflict that was pathological. Everyone must possess that higher level, at least in embryonic form, and in favorable circumstances must be able to develop this possibility. When I examined the way of development in those persons who quietly and as if unconsciously grew beyond themselves, I saw that their fates had something in common. The new thing came to them out of obscure possibilities, either outside or inside themselves. They accepted it and developed further by means of it. It seemed to me typical that some took the new thing from outside themselves, others from within, or rather that it grew into some persons from without and into others from within. But the new thing never came exclusively either from within or from without. If it arose from outside, it became a deeply subjective experience. If it arose from within, it became an outer event. In no case was it conjured into existence through purpose and conscious willing, but rather seemed to be born on the stream of time. Oh yeah, I was going to tell you about yellow and blue, wasn't I? Blue, chesed, meaning mercy, basically. It's similar to agape, the Greek universal love. Or gedula, meaning glory. Vigadula, vigabura, vigadula, the power and the glory, as in, Christianity and shit. Vigabura, vigadula, the power, the glory. But, yeah. So what was I talking about? That's blue. And then yellow is the middle. Hopefully, a little bit of BT is leaking through Edward today. Sorry. But it's disorienting. I'm disoriented. Anyway, so that's the Hermit, as in the cover of that Led Zeppelin album, the old man with the lantern. I tend to think of him with the head of a jackal and a lantern and a caduceus. Anyway, it's Virgo. So that's fun. And it's also kind of like, okay, so what's the heart and there's levels. There's the level you experience it right now, and there's levels beyond, and levels within. So they say there's trees within trees within trees. No need to think about it too much. Anyway, what? In no case was it conjured into existence through purpose and conscious willing, but rather seemed to be born on the stream of time. We are so greatly tempted to turn everything into purpose and method that I deliberately express myself in very abstract terms in order to avoid causing a prejudice in one direction or another. The new thing must not be pigeonholed under any heading, for then it becomes a recipe to be applied mechanically, and it would again be a case of, quote, right means, end quote, in the hands of, quote, wrong man, end quote. I have been deeply impressed with the fact that, I guess one difference, I think is generational between me and Carl Jung, is he's still kind of operating under the assumption that you're going to be able to keep anybody from access to whatever, like everybody has access to everything now to one degree or another. So it's no longer a question of like, don't let people look at it, like, okay, they're going to look at it, dude. I have been deeply impressed with the fact that the new thing presented by fate seldom or never corresponds to conscious expectation. That I agree with. And still more remarkable, though the new thing contradicts deeply rooted instincts as we have known them, it is a singularly appropriate expression of the total personality, an expression which one could not imagine in a more complete form. What did these people do in order to achieve the development that liberated them? As far as I could see, they did nothing but let things happen. As Master Lu Tzu teaches in our text, the light rotates according to its own law. If one does not give up one's ordinary occupation, the art of letting things happen, action through non-action, letting go of oneself as taught by Meister Eckhart, became for me the key opening, the door to the way. We must be able to let things happen in the psyche. For us, this actually is an art of which few people know anything. Consciousness is forever inferring, helping, correcting, and negating, and never leaving the simple growth of the psyche process in peace. It would be simple enough if only were not the most difficult of all things. To begin with, the task consists solely in objectively observing a fragment of a fantasy in its development. Nothing could be simpler. And yet, right here, the difficulties begin. No fantasy fragment seems to appear, or yes, one does, but it is too stupid. Hundreds of good reasons inhibited. One cannot concentrate on it. It is too boring. What would it amount to? It is nothing but, etc. The conscious mind raises prolific objections. In fact, it often seems bent upon plotting out the spontaneous fantasy activity in spite of real insight, even a firm determination on the part of the individual to allow the psychic process to go forward without interference. Often a veritable cramp of consciousness exists. If one is successful in overcoming the initial difficulties, criticism is likely to start in afterwards and attempt to interpret the fantasy, to classify, to aestheticize, or to depreciate it. The temptation to do this is almost irresistible. After complete and faithful observation, free rein can be given to the impatience of the conscious mind. In fact, it must be given, else obstructing residences develop. But each time the fantasy material is to be produced, the activity of consciousness must again be put aside. I said that last part like that because I was toying with the idea of closing there, because it doesn't seem to have an end in sight. Oh no, I'll keep reading. There's 2 pages left. All right. In most cases, the results of these efforts are not very encouraging at first. They usually consist of webs of fantasy which yield no clear knowledge of their origin or goal. Also, the way of getting at the fantasies is individually different. For many people, it is easiest to write them, others visualize them, and others again draw them and paint them without visualization. In cases of high degree of consciousness cramp, often the hands alone can fantasy. They model or draw figurines that are often foreign to the conscious mind. All right. These exercises must be continued until the cramp in the conscious mind is released, or in other words, until one can let things happen, which was the immediate goal of the exercise. In this way, a new attitude is created, an attitude which accepts the non-rational and the incomprehensible simply because it is what is happening. This attitude would be poison for a person who has already been overwhelmed by things that just happen, but it is of highest value for one who chooses, with an exclusively conscious critique, only the things acceptable to his consciousness from among the things that happen, and thus is gradually drawn out of the stream of life into stagnant backwater. It seemed like a really good option until he called it stagnant backwater. But anyway, I've decided, I don't know how long, honestly, the episode is going to be, but I've decided that's where I'm going to stop. And I can't find the little bookmark sticker thingy, but I'll do that on my own time. And instead, all right, there was a knot at the end, or no, there's been a knot. I think we got through the knot. I think if the knot comes up again, we'll get through it. So, this episode brought to you by Gwydion, I guess, but Edward did the reading. If you were there, you saw what happened. It was really cool. I guess that's it. And next, it'll be Gwydion reading the Meccan Revelations. Until then.